Tonight, Pakistan decides. The fate of the nation hangs in the balance as stringent controls fall over voters. The perilous situation continues with violence erupting throughout. No way out. Israel's Netanyahu rejects the latest Hamas deals, claiming that overwhelming victory is certain in a matter of just months. Brokering nations scramble to uphold whatever truce possible for the sake of aid. Trump all the way. The Nevada caucuses kick off with Trump leading overwhelmingly and with Nikki Haley not even on the ballot. But trouble could be brewing for the former president as the Supreme Court deliberates on his Colorado ballot ban. And sporty pooches. Possum pups kick it off on the pitch at the 20th Puppy Bowl celebrations. All that and more as World News Tonight starts right now.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here's Anuradhi Vikramasinghe.
A very good evening and thank you for joining us tonight on World News. Lovely to have you here. We have a plethora of updates on key global events lined up for you tonight, starting off next door in Pakistan. Pakistani authorities shut mobile internet services across the country as millions headed to the polls today for an election in which old dynasties are vying for power, while the country's widely popular former leader languishes behind bars and militants ramp up the deadly attacks. The much-anticipated vote, already delayed for months, comes as the country of 220 million faces mounting challenges, from economic uncertainty and frequent militant attacks to climate catastrophes that are putting its most vulnerable at risk.
The election comes almost 2 years after the previous Prime Minister, cricketer turned politician Imran Khan was ousted in a no-confidence vote. Three-time Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is now on the ballot in what many analysts say in Pakistan's least credible election yet. Both calls and data services were suspended, though Wi-Fi networks appear to be working. Many citizens reported that their daily life activities are facing a large inconvenience as a result of the network suspensions. Polls were scheduled to close at 5 p.m. local time, but the local media reported that the Election Commission of Pakistan has extended polling times in some centres across the country. It was also reported that female participation is low in Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province due to strict tribal customs. The country is on high alert with a heavy security presence at polling stations across the country. As violence continues, at least 9 people, including 2 children and 6 security officials, were killed in attacks by suspected army groups across the country. Border crossings with Afghanistan and Iran were shut for both cargo and pedestrians to ensure full security during the polling. Meanwhile, the military is looming large over this election. The army wields considerable influence over Pakistan's political system, and candidates vying for power often seek the support of its generals. For many years, Nawaz Sharif has been a thorn in the side of the army, but now, the man who spent more time in power than anyone else since 1990 is believed to be their chosen candidate.
It seems there is no end in sight to the Israel-Palestine conflict as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected the proposal suggested by Hamas despite the efforts of brokering nations. The swift denial comes with steady assurances that the country is confident in completely overpowering Hamas and achieving certain victory in the conflict. However, top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken continues to maintain some hope in salvaging the situation.
אנחנו בדרך לניצחון מוחלט.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday rejected Hamas's proposal for a ceasefire,
זה עניין של חודשים.
saying at a news conference that total victory in Gaza was within reach, adding that success was not a question of years or decades, but a matter of months, and pledging to destroy the Palestinian Islamist group that held sway in the densely populated and now war-shattered enclave. Hamas had proposed a ceasefire of 4.5 months, during which the militants would release all the remaining Israeli hostages, or the bodies, of those kidnapped during an October 7th rampage through Israeli communities that left 1,200 dead. In exchange, Hamas demanded Israel withdraw its troops from the Gaza Strip, followed by an agreement on an end to the war. But Israel has repeatedly ruled out anything other than a temporary ceasefire to effect the return of captives or that leaves Hamas in control of Gaza. The Hamas offer, the contents of which were first reported, is a response to an earlier proposal drawn up by American and Israeli spy chiefs and delivered to Hamas last week by Qatari and Egyptian mediators. Israel responded to the October 7th attacks with a devastating air and ground operation inside the Gaza Strip, which Palestinian health officials say has killed more than 27,000 people and displaced most of Gaza's 2.3 million residents. The onslaught was interrupted but once, when a 7-day truce allowed for the release of more than 100 captives in exchange for scores of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails.
Haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah, a few weeks.
Netanyahu's rejection of the Hamas offer comes after an intense diplomatic effort to reach a negotiated pause in the fighting. The Israeli leader met earlier in the day with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, where they discussed the Hamas proposal. A senior Hamas official told Netanyahu's rejection showed the Israeli leader intended to pursue conflict in the region. Another senior Hamas member said the group would send a delegation to Cairo on Thursday to pursue further ceasefire talks with Egypt and Qatar.
Now for an update on the unprecedented Putin interview. The Kremlin says former Fox News host Tucker Carlson has interviewed Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Carlson said earlier on X that he wanted to do the interview because Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they are implicated in. It's Mr. Putin's first one-on-one interview with a Western journalist since the full-scale war in Ukraine. We have other Derana World News special correspondent Nerandi Gamage in Kursk, Russia with the latest. Nerandi?
Yes, Anuradhi. The interview is set to air on Tucker Carlson's website. He had initially promised to upload the interview live and unedited to his X account. Elon Musk, who owns the platform, had promised not to suppress or block the interview. Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said the only interview that is safe in this situation is the interrogation in The Hague. Meanwhile, Russian missile and drone strikes targeted cities in Ukraine, killing at least 5 people and wounding dozens more. The attacks come as the European Union's top diplomat is on a visit to Ukraine to discuss the bloc's unwavering support for Kyiv as the war nears its third year. Ukrainian authorities reported that Russia fired cruise missiles, ballistic missiles and Shahed-type drones at 6 regions across the country, killing at least 5 civilians and wounding almost 50 others. Officials said 4 people were killed in Kyiv when missile or drone wreckage hit an 18-story apartment building, causing a fire that gutted apartments on several floors. Power was knocked out in parts of Kyiv with high-voltage cables damaged and people trapped under rubble. City authorities reported 40 people were wounded in Kyiv, including pregnant women. Back to you, Anuradhi.
All right, thank you. That was other Derana World News special correspondent Nerandi Gamage in Kursk, Russia. Still in the region, Sweden dropped its investigation into the explosions in the 2022 on Nord Stream pipelines carrying Russian gas to Germany, saying it lacked jurisdiction in the case but had handed evidence it had uncovered over to German investigators, while Denmark also has its own separate inquiry ongoing. But if no conclusive evidence is found by either country, the mystery behind one of the most significant acts of infrastructure sabotage in modern history could remain unsolved. Following that story for us tonight is other Derana's Chathara Jandre in Stockholm, Sweden with the latest. Chathara.
Yes, Anuradhi. The multi-billion-dollar Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines under the Baltic Sea were ruptured by a series of blasts in the Swedish and Danish economic zones, releasing vast amount of methane into the air. Swedish prosecutors said in the statement nothing had emerged to indicate Sweden or Swedish citizens were involved in the attack which took place in international waters. Russia and the West have pointed finger at one another, each denying any involvement or responsibility. Germany told the UN Security Council it had found traces of subsea explosive on a sailing yacht that may have been used to transport the explosive, and trained divers may have attached the explosive to the pipelines. Some Western officials claim Russian military vessels were in the area at the time, but others say no hard evidence exists. A Kremlin spokesman said Russia would now was that Germany would to investigate the explosions. Back to you, Anuradi.
All right, thank you. That was Other Derana World News Special Correspondent Chatra Jayendra in Stockholm, Sweden. An update on the devastating wildfires in Chile now. Families combed the rubble in search for missing relatives in central Chile as lower temperatures brought relief to the region, where firefighters tried to extinguish the remnants of wildfires that have killed at least 130 people in recent days.
Wildfires in Chile have left at least 130 people dead in recent days. Survivors are left dealing with grief for lost family members while trying to salvage what little is left. Marcea Besayas received a donated mattress which she has laid out inside the only surviving part of her house, a chicken coop.
This is how I ended up. This is what is left of all of my sacrifice. I'm hoping to receive some help to rebuild something so I can have somewhere to sleep tonight. Some kids from Santiago left me that mattress.
On top of mourning their losses, survivors have had to stay alert because of subsequent looting. Irma Dominguez is currently keeping watch.
This is my son's house. My son is currently at the hospital because he had injuries from when he tried to rescue his father from the flames. Sadly, he wasn't able to. His father died in the house back there. It's all terrible. It's inexplicable. We've got no help, nothing. That's the worst part. No one helped us. Fire brigades didn't come. We had nothing. It was a terrible disaster.
Thousands of families are still looking for loved ones, with only a few bodies identified and hundreds still missing. The wildfires were the worst natural disaster to strike the South American nation since a 2010 earthquake and tsunami that left more than 500 dead. Its speed and deadliness were unprecedented. Scientists say hotter temperatures have been brought on by climate change and the El Niño phenomenon, and that as climate change worsens, extreme weather will become more frequent and severe. President Gabriel Boric visited the stricken area on Tuesday and announced a series of measures to help families, including suspending payments for utilities, donations of housing supplies, and improved medical leave.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. We'll be back with news on how the world's climate is faring right now. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service has reported that the world just experienced its hottest January on record, continuing a run of exceptional heat fueled by climate change. Last month surpassed the previous warmest January, which occurred in 2020 in C3S's records going back to 1950. The exceptional month came after 2023 ranked as the planet's hottest year in global records going back to 1850, as human-caused climate change and the El Niño weather phenomenon, which warms the surface waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean, pushed temperatures higher. Every month since June last year has been the world's hottest on record, compared with the corresponding month in previous years. World leaders promised in 2015 to try to limit the long-term temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is seen as crucial to help avoid the most damaging impacts. The first year-long breach doesn't break that landmark Paris Agreement, but it does bring the world closer to doing so in the long term. Not all hope is lost, however, as scientists say urgent action to cut carbon emissions can still slow warming. President Joe Biden vowed retaliation for American soldiers' deaths, prompting a U.S. missile strike in Baghdad targeting a Kataib Hezbollah commander, which has been reported as successful. It was in response to a Jordan-based attack. The White House signals ongoing multi-strike retaliation against assailants in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen.
A U.S. strike in Baghdad killed a commander of Kataib Hezbollah on Wednesday, according to the Pentagon, who say the Iran-backed group is responsible for attacking its forces. A cameraman captured the aftermath of a drone strike in Baghdad. A statement from the military did not name the slain commander. but 2 security sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, say he was Abu Bakr al-Sadi. A source said the strike killed 3 people and destroyed a vehicle used by Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF. It's a state security agency composed of dozens of armed groups, many of them close to Iran, and some fighters and commanders among its ranks belong to Kataib Hezbollah. The US began retaliatory strikes last weekend against Iran-backed groups in Iraq and Syria, in what it said was just the beginning of its response to the killing of the 3 US soldiers in January near the Jordan-Syria border. Iraq and Syria have witnessed near-daily tit-for-tat attacks between hardline Iran-backed armed groups and US forces stationed in the region since the Gaza war began in October.
On the road to the White House now, Nevada voters began heading to the polls with the caucuses underway, largely expected to be a smooth ride to victory for former President Donald Trump, seeing as there is no Nikki Haley on the ballot. But while Nevada may be one fell swoop, the U.S. Supreme Court is deliberating on Trump's political future, dealing with the Colorado ballot ban.
Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is expected to cruise to victory in Nevada's GOP-organized caucus, where his only challenge in Texas, Pastor Ryan Binkley, picking up a further 26 delegates and further cementing his dominance in the race to secure the party's presidential nomination. Nikki Haley only managed a second-place finish in the Silver State's primary, suffering humiliation of scoring fewer votes than the none of these candidates box on ballot papers. Ms. Haley's defeat did not cost her any delegates, but it did severely weaken her claim to be able to mount a serious challenge to Mr. Trump. It also places even greater pressure on her performance in South Carolina, where the state's primary arrives on 24th February. Meanwhile, the US Supreme Court will wade into uncharted legal waters as it considers if Donald Trump should be barred from running for president. The justices will weigh if Colorado can strike Mr. Trump off its ballot after finding he engaged in insurrection over the US Capitol riot. That decision will also determine if similar bids to keep Mr. Trump off the ballot in other states are valid. In other news, self-help author Marianne Williamson has announced she is suspending her campaign challenging Joe Biden for the Democratic nod after 2 weak primary performances.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news right after this. Welcome back. When it comes to illnesses, we all know that prevention is mostly better than cure. Well, for some diseases, there is no choice but to go on a path of cure and eradication, like cancer, for example. But it seems there is new hope now for the proactive prevention of cancer in the form of a vaccine. A new Cleveland Clinic breast cancer vaccine is showing promising results in trial patients. Here's an explanation on how these vaccines can be a breakthrough to fight cancer.
Vaccines, hailed by doctors and public health officials for unequivocally saving millions of lives. But in the wave of the COVID pandemic, as controversial as ever, with vaccine exemptions in American schools at all-time highs as hesitancy soars.
Now they want us to inject experimental gene therapy.
In this environment, the future of cancer prevention emerging. Yes, vaccines for cancer. After multiple rounds of chemo, radiation, and a double mastectomy, doctors said Jennifer Davis was cancer-free. But she still couldn't shake the fear. Now she's living with a sense of hope, all thanks to an experimental cancer vaccine. In 2021, Davis became the first person in the world to receive the Cleveland Clinic's breast cancer vaccine targeting triple-negative breast cancer, or TNBC. It's currently in phase 1 clinical trials tested on TNBC survivors trying to prevent recurrence. Dr. Kumar says 42% of women who are treated for triple-negative breast cancer have a recurrence within 5 years. And doctors say before, there wasn't too much they could do. But this new vaccine, 2 decades in the works, hopes to change that. Here's how it works. Women produce a special lactation protein called alpha-lactalbumin that only occurs when they are breastfeeding. but it can pop up again in many triple-negative breast cancer cases. So the vaccine teaches the woman's immune system to recognize that protein, kill it, and kill the cancer cells in the process too. Phase 1 trials show early signs of a good immune response and minimal side effects, such as lumps or irritation at the injection site. Phase 2 intends to test just how effective it is at stopping recurrence of the cancer. It's part of a growing medical movement. Instead of searching for a cure for cancer, use vaccines to try to eradicate different types. And several show promising early data. It may be years until these vaccines become mainstream, going beyond just cancer survivors to everyone, if people take them.
The much anticipated 20th anniversary of the Puppy Bowl is ready to wow. The annual event will be simulcast across multiple platforms, ensuring viewers everywhere can join in the furry festivities. Puppy Bowl promises to be a spectacular event with 131 puppies from 73 shelters and rescues across 36 states in the US and territories participating in the cutest game of the year. The 3-hour special not only aims to entertain but also to encourage pet adoption, a mission that has been at the heart of the Puppy Bowl since its inception. To mark 2 decades of playful puppies and successful adoptions, Animal Planet has partnered with a host of brands to enhance the experience for fans and to drive awareness for animal adoption. Bark Social is hosting Puppy Bowl watch parties with off-leash areas and on-site adoption experiences at their various locations. Fans can engage with Puppy Bowl through various multi-platform elements such as the Popularity Playoffs bracket, social media stickers, GIFs and AR filters. Well, now that is a Super Bowl that I'll definitely be watching. And that's all the stories we have for you tonight. Join us again tomorrow for more updates on key global events. See you next time. Have a good night.